Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Mastuma Viddhishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us. May our study be fulfilling, full of vigor and illuminating. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So this is a Vedanta Series question and answer. There is one question in advance, but let's see if there are any other questions and we can tie the answers together.
Maharaj, I had a question, but I'm not sure whether I'll pose that anyways and see if there are interest. It's about concentration. How do I concentrate my mind while doing the meditation? Because it always wanders off. That's one part of the question. Second is, what should I concentrate? I'm concentrating on my guru and as well as Sri Ramakrishna, but how do I enhance that concentration so that I really go to a next level as well? So right now, I try to concentrate and it fizzles off, try to bring my mind back. But it's just a kind of bringing it a bit higher so that I'm really concentrated as opposed to, losing it and going here and there. Maybe it's a very general question, but that's what I'm struggling with. I have been struggling with, not just struggling with, have been struggling with.
All right, so we have to understand what the components of meditation are. And any subject that begins with meditation is inadequate because we have to see what the components are in our daily life that normally contributes toward meditation. What do I mean by that? If I sit down and relax a little bit and close the eyes, some picture comes in my mind, some impression comes in my mind, maybe some feeling comes in my mind. And we can categorize these into what are called, from the human point of view, distractions or illuminations. Now, if we consider that most of our life to be distractions, then we have an inadequate way of dealing with life. So we think that meditation, as soon as we think that meditation is an enforced thing, something that involves a little struggle, then it is no longer meditation. Now, there are some things that we find very interesting, and we don't really have to spend much effort trying to find what they are. We can see whatever hobbies and interests are there. So I usually use an example, it's a real example, from somebody who said, I was at a concert. I was there for 4 hours. Now I can easily see which kind of concert it might have been, but any concert that attracts you would be prepared to sit there for 3-4 hours. And one thing we'll always notice, an absence of time. So now we have a definition for concentration. Concentration is the sense of absence of time, when we no longer feel time passing. When you sit down for meditation, look at the watch, oh my goodness. My guru said I have to meditate at least 20 minutes. And look, I see, only 3 minutes passed. What will I do? But I have to follow the guru's instructions. So let me just sit for 20 minutes, see what happens. Then it becomes a battle with the mind. The mind will always win. So if you're at a concert, and I'll take a few examples of concerts. The great master, Beethoven, all his symphonies would last 3-4 hours at a stretch. And nobody was bored. Nobody wanted to get up for tea. Everybody remained enraptured. A symphony has normally 3-4 parts. So you can say, let's say 4 parts. And each part then will have 1 hour allocated. So there is a small break. What was it that enabled Beethoven to have enough concentration to write a symphony that lasted 4 hours? What is it in the audience that enables them to sit and listen for 4 hours? Supposing you have no appreciation for Beethoven's input. Today, if you go to a modern concert, there are a number of components that keep the attention captured. One is visual. So supposing you put a performance on that has a lot of, and supposing you're not epileptic or something, and lots of flashing lights are there, some visual things should be there. Some audio things have to be there, the concert itself. And then you're amongst other people who are enthusiastic. So there is a mass enthusiasm also. And all of this goes to capturing your attention. So this one devotee that I always quote, anonymously of course, said, I went to this wonderful concert. I was there for 4 hours. It was wonderful. And my humorous question was, what a wonderful power of concentration you had. How did you manage it? And he immediately a look of puzzlement came on his face. He said, he wasn't aware that he had this concentration. When you're driving, you're concentrating. There are many examples you have in your own life where you have no difficulty with concentration. But only when you sit down and make it a struggle instead of a spontaneous thing, will you say, oh, I lack concentration. Now the mind, of course, is in several conditions according to the yoga philosophy. We can say that it is in a state, normally speaking, of scatteredness. Now, when we say mind, really what we're meaning is attention. Attention, we have this probe, a kind of scanning mechanism that is able to assess what is there in front of us. And then that goes into a sorting office, so to speak, an identification process, kind of sorting process. And along with the sorting process, an identification, and then a determination, this is what I should do about it. All these processes happen so quickly, we have no idea about it. So we can say that in certain moments, our attention is fully engaged. And if it is interesting enough, it will be engaged just not for 1 moment or 2 moments, but we can prolong it. We learn this with children. A child whose attention is scattered everywhere and is like a sponge absorbing all these new impressions and so on over a 2-year lifespan. You and I will spend some difficult time learning a new language. A child does it within 2 years, brand new language. And everything that it knows is keen to look at, keen to observe. So that if you are able to direct their attention to something that is interesting for them, they have no difficulty with concentration. When you see how a child learns at first to color a picture, and then the tongue hangs out in a physical expression of concentration, and there they are. Or if you get them to watch an interesting cartoon, colorful, with lots of movement in it, they have no difficulty. Now, even a cat would find it interesting. I've seen television is there with lots of moving pictures, and a cat is sitting there mesmerized. But we can easily distract a kitten. Nowadays, we can take a laser beam, something like a red dot, and move it rapidly. The cat wants to chase it. And it's entertaining for humans to watch this cat, thinking that there is some object there. Instinctively, it wants to catch it. Where does the instinct come from? Instinct comes from a will to survive, basically. And nature has a way of making play a training ground for catching our attention. Then in maturity, the big cats in the African bush, when they look at their prey, there is a complete silence, a complete concentration, and then a sudden movement, a sudden spring forward until the prey is caught. Then they relax. So it seems that More or less every organic animal has the capacity to concentrate. That is, has the capacity to have its attention caught, and the human can do it consciously and deliberately. Now, supposing we try to find out what is the step-by-step process in meditation. Knowing that attention will be displayed and scattered in random ways, and then gathering it in to concentrate. And this is the description really of meditation as a process, but there are certain qualifications necessary. But these qualifications can be summarized fourfold. First of all, there must be a sense of sensible, intelligent discernment in your normal waking life. We have to be sure that our attention isn't caught up in things which eventually will cause us pain and harm. And when we study the principles of philosophy, when we study the lives of saints, we can see what is their step-by-step process on it. It is much, much better, instead of trying to repress unhealthy things, such as, things which are immoral or unethical. We have a clear idea, humanity has a clear idea of what that is. We may dispute the specifics, but everybody agrees we shouldn't go haphazardly and murder people. The materialists may say this is an aberration of the brain, just some chemical imbalance. But aside from that, the human person has the capacity to stand back, assess properly, categorize things into what are morally good and what is not good, good and evil. And this capacity to discriminate is there with us all. But what and how are we discriminating? We take for granted that this world is just as we accept it to be. This is our first mistake. This is why we have to study the philosophical principles very well. Whenever we repeat a word, a corresponding picture comes to mind. Normally I use the example of elephants. Supposing I say elephant, and I repeat it, elephant, elephant, elephant. This is what is called a form, a physical form of an elephant, and replayed is called a naam, a subtle form of it. A picture arises in the mind. And if we sustain that, we can then go into the details of it. What is the elephant doing? Supposing we want the elephant to represent strength, and then we repeat strong, and then we repeat elephant, we have somehow a sympathetic vibrating quality in us of strength represented by the elephant. But if there's no value that goes with it and no feeling that goes with it, then we will get bored and concentration will then go. Supposing we repeat what you've just said, how you concentrate on your guru and your personal ideal and so on and so forth, all of that, that's fine. But following the instructions like that, without feeling, the mind will waver completely. That feeling is normally called bhakti, devotion. Now, devotion is not just a religious term or a term for love of God. It is also a term that we can use for love of truth. And inside it will be a desire, a movement that pushes us forward. But the conditions for that have to be understood. So how do we build concentration away from the meditation? Because if we can build up a concentrated way of approaching life, normally speaking, then when it comes to meditation, we simply have to repeat that series for us. So then we have to analyze for ourselves what is distracting. We come down to some basic principles, how we view the world. Now we understand that this world is mithya. This world is a series of apparitional waves, but it doesn't look like that. How can we convince ourselves that this is the case? And if we are able to convince ourselves, then we have mastered one component of the criteria necessary for concentration. And that is the capacity to look at life in a different way, in a revalued way. When we look at all the things called life, what does life consist of? Life consists of the things that we see and hear and touch and taste and so on. We rely on the organs of perception, and then we rely on the organs of action. And the balance of these two makes what we call our life. There are some things we have to absorb and have to react to. Some obligatory things. In your work, for example, you'll have to do it. In eating, you'll have to do it. Sleeping, you have to do it. These are obligatory actions we can't avoid. But in each stage, we have to assess what condition the mind is. The scattered condition, we know. Try to think what is going through the mind at any given moment. A random series of events will occur. And when you sit down, you'll see all of that jungle going on, all that traffic noise going on. But if it's going on anyway in the background, if that's our normal condition, sitting down and trying to control it will be very difficult. So the scatteredness has to be controlled at the eyes open, waking moments. We have to monitor our actions and reactions constantly and see where is our attention being pitched at any given moment. And philosophy tells us the truth of our own being is that it is constantly there. It doesn't change. It is always full. It is always free. It is perfection itself. But why is it that we don't know it? How is it we don't pick that up? Because our attention is pitched in 100,000 different other areas. Now, even in our normal activities, we have to have some regulation. And regulation means that the time available, we try to steer in a consistent way, in a constant way. That's helpful. How we use time is helpful in developing concentration. So that every moment of our day should be regulated nicely. Swami Vivekananda in his Raja Yoga compares this to a battery, electrons moving in one direction. Electromagnetism wasn't really understood in those days, but certainly he understood that the power of electricity and the pioneer of alternating current was his friend Nikola Tesla. So he knew all electrons moving in one direction would give you a battery of power. But if it's not moving in one direction, then what we call electrical energy is just scattered in the ether somewhere. When you gather it in and beam it, in modern ways, we can say there's a laser beam occurs. And the laser beam is so powerful, it can cut any steel. You can do a non-penetrative surgery using laser. That is concentrating light at a certain wavelength and beaming it all in all directions is the same as this gathering process. So scattered is a condition. Another condition will be beaming it in a certain way, momentary concentration. Another state will be some mixture in between the two. But one pointedness is what we're looking for, ekagra. One pointed attention is what we're looking for. We're looking for the laser beam that we call concentration. Now the whole of this Raja Yoga, that is this yoga of meditation, it gives a definition. Patanjali Yoga Sutras gives it up front. What is yoga? Yoga is concentration. Derived from two roots. This is yoga. Yoga is concentration. By concentration means the flow of concentration that we call meditation. And he gives convenient steps toward it. And these steps are adopted by everybody. So the first thing we have to do is understand what this life is, what this world is, not what we think it is or what we perceive it to be, this mithya. So Vedanta puts this out. And there's some other terms for it, would be Maya. And so Maya, there's a definition for it. If you have a mind to do it, you can write it down. Maya is the thought that this world is anything other than God is Maya. I'll put it on the board here, since we have the board. that this world is not God. This is the first step that we have to take in concentration. When we look on the people, places, and events in front of us, we have to revalue them and see one entity appearing in this way as grass and fields and cows and tables and chairs and bodies and relationships, good and bad, difficult, and all the rest of it. And then all the feelings in reaction to that of sadness or joy. Those feelings only come out because of how we value things in front of us. So we have to see things differently. And that requires a little imagination. So we have all the instrumentation, we have all these talents and abilities that require imagination. And if we look at it very carefully, we'll see it was wrongly directed imagination that made a scattered mind in the first place. Because we always ask why and revisit the past. Why is it a past question? Instead of saying, why not, what next? And moving some in a different direction. Or if we look to the future and see what might happen. What is a future question? What if this, what if that? In other words, inviting ghosts which are not really there. Now we also have to understand what thinking is and the power of thought. Nothing is more powerful than second by second thought. Thought is like a beam of light that reveals something, but is more than that. And we have to understand why and where this thought comes from. It comes from a basic entity that is a thinker, supreme thinker. It doesn't move, it doesn't change. Its current is what we call human thought. And when we don't control that thought in concentration, that thought goes off, as it were. It has a pulling power. And the pulling power comes from the unconscious mind that pulls corresponding scenes and people and places and events into audio and becomes your so-called scenic reality in the front. So all of this is to do with one thing. It is called discrimination or the discernment. I prefer the term discernment. Discerning, sorting things out properly. We have the capacity to do that. We have the capacity to take in all information that we have. And like sorting out washing into colored things and white things, we have to sort things out. Do we have the time to do that? We have to learn the art so skillfully that it becomes spontaneous. It becomes our immediate reaction. This in the area of morals and ethics, what is good and bad. This in the area of the subtle version of that, what is good for the mind and what is not. What assists concentration. Now, anything that is not concentrated has its effects. We can see these effects. If we carefully read this Raja Yoga, this Patanjali Yoga Sutras, we will see very, very detailed descriptions, albeit in aphoristic form, of the result of poor concentration. So grief would be one. That is sadness. Sadness, bereavement will be one. Shaking would be one. Irregular breathing is another symptom of this. And when we look at all the disturbances in our own life, it boils down to only this one area. We didn't take our attention and steer it somewhere more usefully. We decided that we would allow the mind either to be in a scattered condition and go with the flow in that sense and not take control. So that becomes a difficulty for us. Now, with anything else, with anything in life, there has to be the conviction to the point of thirst or the point of passion. A magnificent obsession has to be developed. This so with everything in life. Supposing you want to be a top-class musician, supposing you take up the violin or something, and you decide to take easy steps, then if you don't want to give it up after 5 seconds or 5 days, there has to be some internal passion for it. Those people who go to the music school and those people who did the entertaining for our friend who went and attended a concert for 4 hours, those dedicated musicians will rehearse and rehearse and rehearse, but behind it all is some kind of image, some kind of vision for the future. Some kind of vision for the future means it's not in the future, I bring it in now. It becomes a reality now. If you want anything in life, construct a picture. Use your artistic imagination. Supposing you want to be that musician, you can close your eyes and imagine yourself playing all these complicated concertos by Beethoven, violin concertos, and so on and so forth. You then look at somebody who you admire, who is a top violin player. In the 1960s, 70s, Yehudi Menuhin was a famous violin player who also decided that it would be very beautiful to have an East-West fusion, and made a partnership with Ravi Shankar and so on. And they played concerts together. So he was a wonderful, wonderful classic violinist who also decided that there was a beauty in other kinds of music also. Supposing that becomes a person who's a model or ideal for you. And then you see how that playing goes. And you determine, I myself will get that class. And then you see how many years it might take. Given that 8 hours a day, let's say in a day or so, you decide 12 hours a day. Relentlessly I'll practice. I'll practice day and night. And when I make a mistake, I'll say, what a fantastic thing, what a glory. It's an opportunity to correct the mistake and go on. Now, if you have that same attitude in life, you will achieve this concentration, this state of concentration. A small child can do it because when a child gets distracted by physical pain, it trips over, it falls, it grazes his knee, it's bleeding, it runs to the mother for comfort. The mother patches it up, the child is still sobbing and crying. You pick the child up and direct the attention, look at that tree, look at this, look at that. Soon the child forgot its pain. But the pain is still there. It's just the attention is diverted elsewhere. We have to learn the art of diverting the attention in a higher way. And if it is something that is uninteresting, it's not going to work. It has to be something that captivates the attention. The attention says, oh, can we have more of it, more of it, more of it? And so this comes from this great, great thirst, if you will. So Sri Ramakrishna tells that famous story. How can I get this realization? And so on and so forth. Come, student. How can I get a vision of God? That's the context of it. Come. They go to a lake or a river, body of water, and suddenly the teacher plunges the student in and eventually lets the student up with the wisdom to know how long it will take for a gasp of air without it being dangerous. How did you feel? I felt I would die. When you feel that for God, then you know that the light of realization is about to dawn. So this thirst is there, whatever system you take. Because the next question is, what path should we take? What system should we take? Knowing that the attention has to be steered in a certain direction, what subject would we make it? And 4 broad paths are given to you. Vedanta supplies these in a practical way that is called yoga. The most natural and easy is love of God. But love is necessary, whether it's for God or for the ultimate objective, which in philosophy, in Vedanta philosophy, calls Atman, self. That has to be cultivated. In Vedanta itself, in the Advaitic non-dualistic system of Vedanta, this constant meditation, constant steering the attention towards the nature of the eternal self within is called Atma Vichara. And this Atma Vichara involves this constant taking the attention, steering the attention away from the egocentricity of our life and more toward the inherent memory and dignity of this internal self that Bhakti Yoga calls Ishvara, God, beloved, etc. Same thing is used. The Narada Bhakti Sutras will define this bhakti, this thirst, if you will, as paranurakti, or a supreme, unquestioned, unmotivated love for God that has no sense of reward in it. So let us see, maybe this is the way. Maybe when we sit for meditation and assess what is the feeling that arises, and if it is not compatible with that, it's likely that sooner or later this attention will wander away or boredom will set in. So we need to make our meditation varied. So some hints about it. Assuming that all the criteria for meditation has been met, that is, that there is intelligent detachment derived from this discernment, this new evaluation of things in this world. Supposing that all our anxiety is now dealt with in situ, and that means that we are free from our inborn weakness, which is derived from all the study of all the personalities that we study when we study the Enneagram and Essence of Truth. Supposing we deal with all these particular individual traits that where anxiety comes from. Supposing we don't interpret this bhakti as begging. Supposing we insert some strength and confidence in our spiritual pursuit. Supposing that is met with. Supposing we develop this unquestioned love and we practice this direction of attention. In the easiest way, we practice this love of God, that is called practicing the presence of God. God is your companion on your journey. You see God everywhere, in everything. All the energy that is flowing through us comes from that entity, is an expression of that entity, flowing through everything. A revaluation of everything like that is taken up. Supposing we follow, we were discussing yesterday, the 4 necessities identified as criteria for this concentration. Let us look at the discipline necessary. So I was discussing with somebody yesterday these things. They are 4-fold. But you see, one of these contains 6 items. But we can easily understand in a summary way what these 6 items are. We've discussed already that we require this discernment. From this discernment comes detachment. We won't get attached to something that is not really there or is not evaluated in the way we thought it was previously. Automatically detachment takes place. And in the case of Bhakti Yoga, we do away with attachment to things which are not in our favor by attaching our attention to God. That means increasing love of God. When we increase the love of God, then all these distractions, the scattering mind, goes away by itself. It diminishes and ceases altogether. And so this concentration that is normally on ourselves now stops and changes and becomes now an opportunity for openness, where God's grace now flows through to everyone as a blessing. So this first thing, so after this, we take up essentially what is tranquility. These are highlighted as 6 treasures, but it boils down to one thing, because the first thing that is mentioned really is tranquility of mind. And that summarizes everything else. So tranquility and the kindred virtues associated with that is necessary to cultivate those. And then this longing has to be there. Now you can say this longing is for freedom because inherently we have this longing anyway. We don't have to cultivate it or develop it. It's there already. We are just looking for this in different directions that will not lead us to it. In fact, it will entangle us more in a sense of slavery. And we get rid of that by discerning properly. So when we discern, we have to discern in some way between what is eternal and what is non-eternal. Something that is non-eternal is our so-called normal scenario. What is eternal means something that is outside the range of time. And time means a registration of change. If we're able to see the changeless peeping there and using the capacity of our imagination to do it. And we have many, many songs by saints who illustrate this great, great skill of using our creative imagination to counter our current anxiety-based imagination. An exaggerated example, of course, is to sit in a certain place and meditate on the COVID virus. That's one way, because all of us are meditating in some way. Many people are meditating on all the crises throughout the world. Laboring at a crisis itself would create anxiety. And then to say, okay, what if? A what if scenario. What if we run out of vaccinations? What if we have to have injections to go on an aircraft? I saw today in the news, there's a likely scenario. You want to travel on an airplane? Then you may have to get a compulsory vaccination passport, something like that. What if we fall down and when we get up, we cough and sneeze and get a headache and then start concerning ourselves, have we got the COVID virus? And then we go to the hospital and all the rest of it. All of these things are there. And then we go there and they say, actually, no, your anxiety wasn't warranted. So most of our anxiety, in fact, all of our anxiety is due to imagining scenarios that we constructed based on what if. And behind that is a self-preservation urge that indicates that we are actually eternal, that we exist and exist eternally. That's the root basis of it. We have to understand that the entity that doesn't change is the reality. And what we are reviewing is a small image or shadow of it, an indication, a sample of it. It's not exactly illusion, as is interpreted by many people. This Maya is not exactly illusion. It is just a thought that this world is something other than God. And when we turn it around and realize, oh, what we see is actually that one entity. There's no distinction. This attitude is technically called Advaita non-dualism. And so we approach it step by step. We approach it by an intense love of God. And then we see this God in everything. And then we see God flowing through everything, all hands, all eyes, all ears, all heads, all activities presented in nature, the drama of seas that have their evaporation through the sun's power, and then that condenses as rainfall and produces life. We see the miracle of how, and the intelligence and the caring also, of how clouds sit over the mountain and how that bursts into rainfall and how the slope brings the water down into the valley and how we capture the greenness of the valley and plant food and cultivate and eat. What a wonderful drama. You won't find it on Mars. Because Mars, even Mars, doesn't have that tilted axis, where the North Pole and the South Pole is tilted exactly at the right angle for us to get a rotation, so no part of this planet gets overheated. And we have these beautiful seasons. You know, in Zimbabwe, we don't have these 4 seasons. We have 2 seasons. In some parts, the one season has 2 varieties. Is either extremely hot or hell. These are the 2 varieties. But otherwise, we have this 2 seasons of rainy season and dry season. But here in Europe, we have these clear seasons, wonderful seasons going on, and each one with their own beauty and their own lessons to learn if we observe them correctly. So this entity, the Vedanta calls this Brahman, from Brah. Now, Brah has no actual direct meaning, but the image is there of something that rapidly expands, something that has no end to its expanding, and something that expands can also remain unchanged and potential. Brahman is real, and this universe is unreal from the point of view that it is impermanent, changing, confined, limited, what seems to be. So we have to have a firm conviction about this. This is what we call discernment. And then we have to go in for renunciation. The key to all spirituality, to all religions, is renunciation. There's no religion on this earth that does not have this as its basic practice. Jesus taught it. When you go out, don't take a second thing with you. Go in pairs. Where you're received, accept a warm welcome. Where you're not, shake off the dust and move on. Who is my father? Who is my mother? Says Jesus. Those who do the will of God are my father and my mother. So all of these statements and the whole Sermon on the Mount is to do with this cultivation that leads to a sense of moving our attention toward the higher values, away from the basic organic biological impulses, where there's no freedom for us and no hope for freedom in that sense. So this renunciation is giving up all the things that we love from an egoistic point of view. And in the Christian tradition, we are now in a period of what is called Lent, leading up to Easter. That is a period of self-restraint, self-control, a period of fasting, a period of revaluation, but not a period of guilt, because bhakti, this is not what we mean by bhakti. Bhakti is not to do with begging, is not to do with guilt. It's to do with a positive assertion that God is here, God is now, and God is love. That's the positive assertion that we make. And that is the basis for it. Practicing the presence of God everywhere, in everything we do, in all actions, where we sit, where we lie. The other day was St. Patrick's Day, and there, traditionally, the breastplate, of course, it's thought that he didn't actually write this, but never mind, tradition says he did. But what is it? It ends up as Christ is before me, Christ is behind me, above me, below me, to left, to right, everywhere. But what is this Christ? Is this a historical entity? No. This is the cosmic mind. This is cosmic Christ. This is the personal ideal. This is God who's walking with you every inch of the way. This is that entity who is supplying you with the thought current. It is his mind that we are using. And so, what the eyes and ears and senses enjoy, we now start controlling it. Imagine having an animal like a dog or a cat or something like that, let's say a dog, who completely indisciplined, goes on its way, a wild thing like that. Supposing we have a horse, and the horse decides that it will just buck you whenever it likes, throw you overboard, or stop and go whenever it chooses. Well, what use is that? So we have to understand that we have this like this, and the analogy has been used both in Kathopanishad and the Bhagavad Gita of a chariot with all these horses representing the sense organs. Is a wonderful analogy, a wonderful metaphor. These horses inclined to run in different directions unless held by someone controlling the reins. Within us is an inner controller that is moving things and matching harmony for us. And our share is only very small. In the language, biblical languages, the angels make the crooked paths straight for us. That is, all these subtle elements, subtle waves of this life. And we don't see them, we don't know them. You switch a light on, a child switches a light on, they have no idea what is electrical current, how does it connect. All they see is it works. And in today's computer age, it's the same thing. If you want to learn anything as an elderly person, or maybe not so elderly like me, who is not brought up with computers and so on and so forth, if you want to learn all that, catch hold of a 5-year-old child and say, please tell me, how does this phone work? How does this television work? How does this remote control? They'll know it. Straight away, they'll know it. So they're very clever in this way. They've been brought up with it, and they have the intelligence to cope with it. And we maybe have the intelligence to ask them, and the humility to ask them. So the transitory enjoyments, we have to evaluate and say, this is not where our interests should primarily lie. Giving up the desire for a physical body, as well as the highest kind of spirit body of God, this giving all of that up is technically what is called renunciation and detachment. And detachment is a psychological thing. It's taking the attention away from the objects of things as we interpret them. That is how we value them, and revaluing them and putting in, oh Lord, you're there, Lord, you're there. And directing it steadfastly towards one object. And that is called Brahman. That is its goal, whether we think of it as a personal God or otherwise. That is called tranquility. And that is the key criteria, part of the key criteria necessary for a good concentration and meditation. So we can take these things one by one, but longing for liberation, longing for freedom, is the same as longing for God. It's the will to be free, and we all have it intrinsically. It's to access it and direct it in the proper way. And to free from what? Free from all the fetters, all the things that are forged by our ignorance of this fact here. Of this encapsulating fact that says that this world is other than God, and the fact is all this world is that one entity. Looked at through the eyes and the ears and so on and so forth, we interpret it differently, and that's our error. This is technically called ignorance. And that will take our attention away. So there are pure souls who attain this by using these various criteria. And these souls are our example, are our models, and we have to follow them. Now, when all of this criteria is in place, sitting down then, we can take all these scenes that we liked. I'll give you an example. Supposing I sit down and have followed the preliminary instructions for calmness of mind. That is, I make sure that the body has not come to disturb me by arranging my seat correctly. I make sure that my atmosphere around me is conducive towards steering my attention toward the highest truth. Step by step, progressively, patiently doing it. Supposing now my nerves are steadied. If necessary, maybe I have to do some preliminary pranayama. Supposing I have made use of this very, very important, powerful thing called mantra, particularly a bija mantra that leads me directly toward this truth. And supposing as I'm repeating it, I'm repeating it with meditation. That is, with an understanding of its deep meaning, not its superficial meaning, its deeper meaning. There was a devotee who, I'm looking at the list, it probably is not here. Anyway, they went on a pilgrimage. They went on a yatra around Mount Kailash. They asked me, what spiritual practice should I do? I said, well, going around making that pilgrimage itself is a spiritual practice. Going around there, normally you approach it probably from China and move across. And then you end up with viewing Lake Manasara. What practice should I do as I'm walking? Make friends with your mantra. So when a guru gives you the mantra, at first sight, you may not really understand it. It has to be revealed. What does it reveal? What is it revealing, and when is it being revealed? It's being revealed after use and time, after understanding the depths of its meaning beyond the mere sound, and understanding it absolutely truly what it is, connecting with it as the sound embodiment of your chosen ideal that's leading you in toward this. And therefore, when we say meditate, we don't say meditate alone. We say there's a process, prayer, that is putting yourself in a condition of prayerfulness. Secondly, japa, lovingly repeating God's most beloved and special name with feeling. If the feeling is not there, then it doesn't become effective or as effective until we make friends with our mantra. So he did this on his journey, and his great aha moment, his great opening moment was, I now understand this, and I can no longer do without this mantra. And I repeat it constantly now, 24 hours of the day. And a wonderful illustration of this is this beautiful book, The Pilgrim's Way. A Russian Orthodox pilgrim understanding or trying to understand this phrase from St. Paul the Apostle, pray without ceasing. Then he wondered, how is it possible? Now, if we want to rephrase it in the language we have used this morning, we say, how is it possible to take our attention and continuously rearrange it in a constant direction, make our attention constantly flow? What is meditation? Meditation is taking our attention and making it constantly flow toward the object of our adoration. That constant flow, like oil being poured from one vessel to another, is what we call meditation. The height of concentration, sustained concentration. So, assuming all these preconditions are there in place, and assuming that we make friends with our mantra, so that repeating it in a conscious way evokes deep feelings, and with that, insights and revelations. Now we have a stage set. We're beginning to set a stage. In previous metaphors I've used, we have now prepared a runway for a flight. And then just to check to see what is the mind doing. Is there finally no disturbances? Let them come, let them go, be patient with it until there is a state of poise, a blank sheet, a blank screen, and then we can put forward step-by-step scenarios which delightfully lead us. In other words, an internal mental pilgrimage. We take that, evoking memories that will be enlightening to us, will be enthusiastic for us. So we have lots of analogies for that, examples for that. Everybody may recall a favorite holiday place. It might be, let us say, people from Ireland go in normal times anyway to sunny Spain in order to change the color of their skin from white to red. And what did they do? Well, we sat on the beach and we absorb the rays of the sun. Let's use the analogy. We sat in the presence of the delightful presence of our most beloved God, and we allowed ourselves to be saturated by his beams. And what did we feel? We felt at peace, tranquility. And then we felt relaxed. And then the mind was delighted because we noticed other things, how fresh the air is, the beautiful effect of the sea coming in, penetrating on the beach and going back. Maybe the delightful sound of some seagulls somewhere. Maybe the blueness of the sky. The heat which we feel, how it warms the skin nicely, really beyond the skin, penetrates into the very bones. And how then we can say, how I feel, I am loved. You see, by evoking these particular scenes, it doesn't require a struggle in concentration. Already the mind likes it. Oh, take that scene in and then investigate more. Where does this come from? And step by step, we're taking ourselves on a prolonged journey toward the center of our own being until we connect with that internal center within us. And in doing that, we then enter into a state of stillness where we listen to God's voice. And that listening mode is meditation. That listening mode is real prayer. And in that moment of poise, we get this internal feeling of oneness. And when at that point, we have meditation. At that point, we have meditation, where only one thought is in the mind. That is meditation. And we don't worry about the rest, because when even that one thought spontaneously disappears, in other words, when we become one, what is true love? True love is to become one with the object of love. And when that oneness is experienced, that is the product of concentration, which technically we call samadhi, or kaivalya, or any other number of terms. And then we come back, and then the whole process is reviewed again. We can take many journeys. The whole of the Upanishads are journeys going from step by step, from the outside, as it were, step by step, progressively to the inside, then going back to the outside. Great illustration, graphic illustration of this is the Shri Yantra, with all this interlocking triangles and a bindu in the center. And you can go either from the inside to the out or the outside to the in. And this going back and forth to the outside and the inside is what we call meditation as a process. So this is what we have to practice. And so this is an answer to the question about, there's a common question about meditation. So it's now past 12. I hope in some way I've answered or contributed toward answering.
Yes, thank you, Maharaj. Yeah, it's quite very revealing as well to me. I know this is a topic which has been discussed, for a long time, but it's helped me capture some of the key ideas. And I'll just repeat it, because we heard a lot. So the first thing is, it says, don't think of the world as Maya, which comes from all the past thoughts and anxiety. So the first thing which you should do is have discernment. And to help that is bring it to transition your thoughts into thinking of intelligent life, as you gave examples, seeds, growing into plants and all sort of things, to realize that there's a Brahma. Second one is you should have a passion, love, bhakti, called trust, have imagery and vision, and have some feeling to invoke that. And the third is I think Bija mantra, as you said. I think mentioned about the conditions of tranquility,
which is like, practice renunciation, have self-control, and practice it. So these are the things which I noted.
Very good. See, the one thing is, and I mentioned also what is happening next weekend if we get sufficient people. So we're holding the Enneagram and Essence of Truth next weekend. So this question and answer session won't be there if all goes well. And we'll have our first part of the Enneagram and Essence of Truth. Now, if you haven't been on this process, one thing you will discover is that people predominantly, as you know, those who have been on it, are predominantly coming from either the head or the heart or the hand. We put it like that. Supposing a person is coming from the head, it's not that useful to say, see God in everything. You have to say, feel God. And it's that feeling element. If that's missing, that concentration won't be there. So we have to feel the reality of this entity, what philosophy calls the divine self, what we might call the infinite invisible, what we might call God. We have to feel that in everything. We have to feel that in every person. But we also have to feel its presence, its working presence in every person, in every place, in every event, in everything that the senses report. And that's what we have to practice. Then, of course, sitting for meditation, it becomes more of a spontaneous and natural thing. We don't have to struggle. I am here, but God doesn't seem to be anywhere. Anyway, let me follow these instructions. You want to fix a car, you have to follow the instructions, no doubt. But if you have a car that was given to you by a favorite relative and you want to keep it for sentimental reasons, and you name this car, typically in a female way, it is Betty or some other thing. I don't know why that happens, but anyway, people do it. Then you'll be enthusiastic to pour all your resources into fixing the car. In this same way, it is out of love that we are motivated to do anything. And it is this love that we have to cultivate. Either love for a personal God or love for the impersonal entity that we call divine self. In any event, this love has to be there. And the love will produce a longing for it because we all experience an absence of it. Because despite our philosophy, this thought still arises. And so we're caught in this mire of measuring because we're thinking that this world is separate and different from God, and it's not. That we have to be convinced of. All right, so we leave it at that.
Swami, I've listened to what you said. I'm convinced of this oneness. No, I mean, it's not they're even convinced. I've done the comparative studies. My question is relative to something else. Like, even though we don't see God, so we don't see like higher entities, or I would say like more intelligent entities. In my perspective and my recent research, we are already constantly watched over. I don't speak about watch over by government, something like that. I am more like in a spiritual manners.
Okay.
So my question is, like, as humans, aren't we just experimenting, and aren't we just experimenting our life? But I mean, in a sense, as humans, we do learn by trial and error. And I've seen this morning, for example, in the United States, they have even tried, with university, with huge budgets, to do biosphere, just to have like something that would be sustainable. Like they have done this in the middle of the desert. And they failed in some ways. So they experiment, but they learn from their failure. So I'm still considering, like, we try to do our best of our abilities, and I hope that everybody does. but the thing is, are we just not only experimenting and yeah, I mean, like, just trying to figure out the best way to be as humans still? You know what I mean?
Well, the problem that I have with what you've said is the experiments have already been done for us. You see, if you want to learn anything, let's say do a chemistry experiment, you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
But on the basis that it has been done before and you know what to do. So in the spiritual life context, the experimentation has been done already by saints and sages, and we simply have to follow the formula. So for ourselves, there's no new trial and error that we have to do. Having said that, our weakness or our habitual negativity will make us stumble here and there, no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a conscious experimentation. This is just life being life. It's just saying, if you do this, if you walk at night and don't look carefully, you may fall into a pit, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And that is just the fact of it. So we have to therefore learn from that. When we fall into the pit, we take a torch the next time and walk more carefully. We have the equipment to do it. And life is designed to be full of discord so that we can then exercise our skill at making it into a harmony. And no other creature has this ability. So nature is working by itself, and the rest of organic nature doesn't have the capacity to determine, as we can determine. The faculty to discriminate is not there with other entities. But habit is there, no doubt. And habit is also there with us. So we have to deliberately, consciously develop and cultivate new and better and nobler habits. That's called spiritual life. There's no trial and error in it. We take the experience of others and we use exactly the formula. And then, like any other experiment, we find out the truth of it in the end.
I agree. It's like when we're making a recipe, we take it from or with either even a book or like older people or older recipes, and we make it, like you said, a biological mix that would make it something that would be good as foods, for example.
So what we are doing is we're cooking pancakes.
Yes.
And the pancake, the batter that we use is our thought.
Mm-hmm.
And so thought current being presented, let's make good pancakes, which are tasty.
Yeah.
Otherwise it can be a mess, half-cooked thing, and that's not in our favor. So we have to take it in this way.
Yeah.
And if we take Maya in this way, you see, Maya is the thought that this world is not God. That's the fundamental error. This world is nothing more than seemingly fragmented God. And the only thing that fragments it, as it were, is the mind. It's the mind that has to be taken and directed in a certain way. And that's why we have to learn the skill of concentration, or gathering up our attention and steering it in chosen, noble ways. Okay. Doing it habitually until the mind is in a ready state for an internal revelation. That's our job.
Mm-hmm.
As I said many times in previous talks, our job is cleaning. We are cleaners, basically. We clean the body, clean the mind. We clean the mind and the body through various external practices such as bathing, and internally through yoga, exercise, and other things, and the mind through meditation and right thinking.
Right, and I have another question. Our goal as human beings is to get out of samsara, which is the wheel of reincarnation. So, like, how could this process be achieved?
Well, that's if you believe in reincarnation.
Well, I do. In a sense, I have, it's not only a belief. I have seen some doctor that have like basically transcribed some things from some kids that basically they couldn't have known.
So you can
So
see it like that. You can see it like that, or you can see it differently. So I'm going to give you a standard diagram I use. I don't know if you can see that. Supposing this is your standard position, all right? And then what your position is, that you're dealing with all of this from this point of view, and you're setting up a reaction, interaction with this. What you perceive and how you react, that's your life.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're describing. And it doesn't matter if this repeats itself, and we call it reincarnation. And this is also called by you samsara. Now, samsara indicates that there's a repetitive thing going on, yes. But what I'm saying is this. All of this whole thing is a thought that this world is not God. This is where our actions, reactions come from. And we can stand somewhere differently. Why don't we stand here? Because here is the real thinker, the knower.
Mm-hmm.
The witness is standing here. The enjoyer of all of this. When I'm in a witnessing position, I'm an enjoyer. So what is all of this? When I stand here without looking, this is all gone. And that means from that point of view, your question doesn't arise. But when you stand here, your question arises. And I'm saying, please practice standing here.
Mm-hmm.
When you stand here, all these problems get resolved. These are just waves of Maya that come and go. Now, how can we get from here to stand here? Well, we're always here anyway. We have to revalue this whole thing. And we have to say that this thing here, which is consciousness, is expressed in this way as a waking consciousness. And revalue all the things here, because on this side of it are all people, places, and events that you're dealing with. And you have to go from that position to a revaluation to say, this is all waves, including this body, including this mind. And the objects here are all subtle waves. These are called God's angels or tanmatras. And these waves are just manifested glories, graces, if you will. The grace comes from their functions, and the glories are there expressed as divine waves. And then where do these waves come from? They come from a cosmic mind called cosmic Christ, cosmic mind, cosmic Krishna, whatever you like to say.
Mm.
And that cosmic consciousness is there, and that's the only mind that's there. So discover that and sit in there and see what happens. The whole of spirituality and religious endeavor is taking away all these diversions and distractions about what America is doing and what this is doing and that is doing. You know, somebody asked Sri Ramakrishna what he thought of theosophy and these various planes of existence and this and that and the other. And so he said, I have no idea about these things. I have no interest, because these are all unimportant things. These are all, he described them as rubbish, actually. These are all nonsensical things. And that's, of course, why does that arise? Because our ignorance says that all of this, we place this into the reality category. But this is not real from the point of, there's no constancy or permanence for it. It changes. It changes and is in the realm of impermanence. So you're asking me a question from this point of view with a thought that, not a consideration perhaps, that however old you are, I don't know how old you are, but however old it is, in 100 years' time will be irrelevant for you completely. Because this body and mind here will not be there to consider the question. And when you go and continue your experiences over to another version of this that you happen to call reincarnation, then a different set of things are there. Different realities will be there, may well be there.
Thank you. Interesting.
See, there's a story, you see, which I'll finish off with. So a person, an uncle died and the family got round and they thought they'd contact his spirit. So they sat around a table, holding hands. And sure enough, the room went dark by itself and a voice boomed through and said, "This is Uncle Fred." They said, "Well, we've been trying to contact. What's it like on the other side?" And he said, "You won't believe it. We can eat as much as we like. We can drink as much as we like. We can run about as much as we like. We have complete freedom. And we have, no barriers whatsoever. And we can propagate the species as many times as we like." He said, "My goodness, I never realized heaven was like that." No, I'm not in heaven. I'm a rabbit in Queensland, Australia. All right, good. So with that, we leave it. Okay, all good. Okay. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.